Have you ever been in a conversation where, even after saying all you thought you needed to, you left feeling defeated? Have you felt that tightness in your chest, as if every word uttered pushed you further from your own inner strength? Perhaps you are surrounded by individuals who speak over others, interrupt constantly, use mockery as a weapon, and dominate conversations with arrogance posing as confidence. Maybe, deep down, you've believed that staying silent was a weakness, that not defending yourself was surrender, that not reacting meant losing. But what if all of that is a carefully constructed illusion? What if true power resides not in the relentless pursuit of verbal dominance, but in the profound, resonant stillness that words can never fully capture? Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most profoundly misunderstood and frequently misinterpreted thinkers in history, recognized a truth that few possess the courage to acknowledge. Those who speak excessively often reveal far more than they intend, and those who feel the urgent need to convince others are often already operating from a position of insecurity. The world conditions us to believe that we must aggressively fight for our beliefs, meticulously explain ourselves, and defend our ideas as if every interaction were a relentless battle for the absolute truth. But Nietzsche proposes a different path, a more subtle, more strategically devastating, and infinitely more intellectually sophisticated approach. He understood that silence is not simply the absence of noise. It is, in fact, an overwhelming and formidable presence. Silence is disconcerting. It has the power to destabilize. It forces others to confront not only their own assumptions, but also their own vulnerabilities. This message is tailored for those who consistently feel overlooked, overshadowed, and systematically invalidated. For those who repeatedly leave conversations with the nagging feeling that their true voice has gone unheard. For those who are simply exhausted from being the easy target, the perpetually nice one, the peacemaker perpetually taken advantage of. Perhaps you've mistakenly equated your silence with submission, but today, we will redefine its meaning and unlock its potential. We will unveil silence as your most potent weapon, revealing that true victory does not stem from winning a single argument, but from attaining a state of being where arguments become irrelevant. Prepare to perceive silence in an entirely new light, not as a lack of response, but as the ultimate and most decisive response. Let's delve into Nietzsche's profound insights and unlock the secrets to mastering any situation without uttering a single word. Why do we feel this ingrained compulsion to respond immediately, to rigorously rebut, to meticulously correct, and to exhaustively prove that we are undeniably right? The answer lies in our deep-seated conditioning. We are taught to believe that truth must be defended with unrelenting fervor, and that if we remain silent, we are implicitly conceding victory to our opponents. However, Nietzsche astutely recognized this very compulsion as a glaring symptom of our deepest insecurities, the profound fear of appearing weak or inadequate. At the heart of this fear lies the ego, a fragile construct that cannot tolerate being challenged or questioned, one that irrationally conflates disagreement with personal attack, thereby transforming every exchange into a treacherous battlefield. Nietzsche argued that most people engaged in arguments are not genuinely searching for the truth. Their underlying objective is to wield power, to assert dominance. They relentlessly seek to reaffirm their own cherished beliefs, not because those beliefs are grounded in irrefutable evidence or unwavering logic, but because if those beliefs were to crumble, their entire sense of self would disintegrate. Argumentation in this context is not a noble pursuit of wisdom, but a desperate and defensive armor, a primal scream from the ego, desperately attempting to maintain control of the prevailing narrative. And what does this ultimately mean? It means that the very moment you feel compelled to justify yourself, to relentlessly prove your point, you have already unwittingly entered their game and, in doing so, have already lost. The inherent need to defend your position reveals that you remain ensnared by the desperate desire for acceptance, validation, and comprehension from others. Nietzsche famously termed this phenomenon herd morality, the ingrained behavior of those who perpetually live under the oppressive weight of societal expectations, perpetually striving to be perceived as good, correct, and just in the eyes of others. This relentless pursuit of external approval is precisely what keeps you chained to weakness. True strength, according to Nietzsche, lies not in the transient victory of convincing others of your point of view, but in the unwavering self-assurance of not needing to do so. It resides in steadfastly upholding your personal vision, even in the face of derision, unrelenting criticism, and outright rejection. It is in the ability to remain unshaken and resolute, even when profoundly misunderstood. Nietzsche advocates for a distinct form of power, one that is not measured by fleeting verbal triumphs, but by the enduring mastery of one's own internal state. This power stems from the remarkable ability to remain calm, composed, and centered while the world around you descends into chaos. It flourishes exponentially when you consciously choose to cease reacting impulsively. If you genuinely aspire to transcend the ordinary and achieve true victory, you must deeply internalize this fundamental truth. The game of discussion is essentially a staged performance, and the first one to leap onto the stage and begin acting has already forfeited the game. Nietzsche brilliantly understood that the reactive mind is, by its very nature, a subjugated mind. Conversely, the observing mind is the truly powerful and potentially dangerous one, precisely because it exists above the incessant need to prove anything to anyone. But if we are to consciously refrain from reacting, how can we effectively exert influence and project our strength onto others? If words often betray us, how do we convey our power without uttering even a single phrase? Nietzsche, as always, provides a profound and insightful answer, one that lies within the ideal of the Übermensch, the being who transcends the limitations of conventional morality and commands the world through the absolute mastery of self-control. In the following section, we will delve into this transformative figure and explore how the Übermensch embodies the strategic utilization of silence as a formidable weapon of dominance. Are you genuinely prepared for this level of understanding? Because from this point forward, silence itself begins to speak volumes. If this content is resonating with you and enriching your perspective, please take a moment to click the subscribe button and join this intellectual journey. Your support fuels the creation of content that challenges norms and empowers individuals. Nietzsche did not write for the faint of heart, nor for those complacent with mediocrity. He penned his works for the rare few who possess the audacity to embark on a profound inner exploration, to confront their own inherent shortcomings, and to alchemize that raw material into unyielding strength. He saw the average person as tragically trapped by the suffocating constraints of societal conventions, stifling moralism, and the relentless need for external validation. But he also recognized the existence of another type of human being, exceptionally rare, intellectually dangerous, and undeniably free. The Übermensch, or overman, does not passively react to the external world. Rather, he actively shapes the world in his own unique image. And the most captivating aspect of this transformation is that it often occurs in profound and complete silence. The Übermensch has no need to win petty debates, nor does he engage in manipulative emotional games. He observes with unwavering focus. He comprehends the underlying dynamics at play, and he meticulously chooses when to speak, and even more importantly, when to remain strategically silent, because he has grasped a fundamental truth that most others fail to perceive. Silence is a potent form of language, a language that transcends the need to convince, and instead simply commands attention and respect. The silence of the Übermensch is not a mere void. It is palpable. It is a carefully crafted threat. It exudes an undeniable sense of authority. It is the unmistakable sound of absolute self-mastery. While others around him are clamoring for attention, he commands respect with a mere glance. While others desperately try to explain themselves and their actions, he observes with detachment, subtly exposing their inherent weaknesses through nothing more than his unwavering calm. His silence forms an impenetrable wall. Those on the other side of it grow increasingly frantic, desperately attempting to decipher what lies beneath, and in their ensuing desperation, they invariably make critical errors, inadvertently reveal too much, and ultimately lose their carefully constructed balance. This strategic silence is not synonymous with passivity. It represents the absolute command of one's own internal energy, a meticulously planned economy of action. The Übermensch understands that every word spoken is a strategic move revealed. Every uncontrolled emotional reaction is an exposure of a vulnerable point. This is why he chooses to remain deliberately quiet, not because he lacks anything to say, but precisely because he has transcended the overwhelming need to prove himself to anyone. His very presence speaks volumes on its own, and perhaps even more significantly, it disrupts and unsettles those around him because his deliberate silence forces them to confront their own inner turmoil. In a society saturated with incessant noise, those who master the art of silence are the true kings. Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch as an individual who fearlessly creates his own values, meticulously crafts his own rules, and adheres to his own internally derived morality. He remains entirely independent of external validation, and that very independence is what makes him so deeply feared and respected, because nothing is more profoundly destabilizing than encountering an individual who cannot be manipulated by guilt, fear, or the insatiable need for acceptance. His silence serves as an impenetrable shield against all such manipulative mechanisms, and when he does choose to speak, his words possess the power to topple empires. But this raises a crucial question. What is it about silence that is so unsettling for others? Why do so many people feel profoundly threatened when someone simply chooses not to react? What internal processes occur within the human mind when the anticipated confrontation is replaced by a deafening and overwhelming absence? The answer lies in the realm of psychology, and that is precisely what we will explore in the following section. To truly understand the immense power of silence, we must first understand the underlying chaos it generates in the minds of others. And trust me, the impact is far more profound than it initially appears. Silence is not merely the absence of audible sound. It is a mirror, and what it reflects back to many is often unbearable. When you deliberately choose not to react, you are not simply silencing yourself. You are compelling the other person to confront their own internal voice, to grapple with their own arguments without the comforting buffer of external resistance. This, in itself, is deeply destabilizing because most people do not speak to genuinely express themselves. They speak to protect themselves, to convince themselves, and to conceal the void that often exists between what they profess to be and who they truly are. When you remain silent, their carefully constructed disguise begins to crumble, exposing their vulnerabilities. Social psychology has consistently demonstrated that, in confrontational situations, silence is frequently perceived as a form of judgment. It is irrelevant whether you are simply listening attentively. The speaker inevitably begins to feel exposed and profoundly insecure. Why is this the case? Because without your immediate response, without your predictable reaction, they lose their carefully established control over the unfolding narrative. The human brain, sensing this loss of control, enters a state of heightened alert. The amygdala, the brain region responsible for processing fear and anxiety, becomes highly activated. The other person instinctively begins to project their own deepest fears and insecurities onto you. Is he silently judging me? Has he detected my underlying insecurity? Does he suspect that I am bluffing or exaggerating? In this intense psychological battlefield, silence functions as an invisible blade. It cuts deeply, where no one can see the wound, yet everyone acutely feels the pain. Nietzsche intuited this dynamic long before the advent of modern psychology. He understood that the average person exists in a state of perpetual servitude to their own impulsive reactions. They act on fleeting impulse, react out of ingrained vanity, and speak out of a desperate fear of being forgotten or ignored. The superior spirit, the one who has truly mastered himself, chooses to remain strategically silent because he understands that every word unnecessarily uttered is a valuable piece surrendered to the enemy. Every uncontrolled emotional reaction is an involuntary scream that reveals precisely where to attack. Furthermore, strategic silence has a particularly devastating impact on manipulators. Those who thrive on the emotional control of others depend entirely on eliciting specific reactions in order to sustain their dominance. When you consciously choose not to react, you effectively break the manipulative cycle, sending the manipulator into a state of near panic. They desperately require your predictable response to validate their own precarious position. Without it, they become profoundly disoriented. They begin to expose their own vulnerabilities, and they reveal the inherent weakness they have so tirelessly attempted to conceal. But there is an even deeper dynamic at play. Silence also has the power to trigger unresolved emotional pain. It can activate dormant traumas of rejection, abandonment, and humiliation, because the other person is suddenly confronted with the realization that they are not the center of attention, that their words are insufficient to command attention, and that their very presence is failing to make the desired impact. This realization is utterly intolerable for the narcissistic ego. Therefore, when you choose to remain silent, you are not merely defending yourself, You are launching an attack precisely where it hurts the most, at the very core of their deeply ingrained illusion of self-importance. This is precisely why strategic silence requires immense inner strength. It is inherently uncomfortable, not only for those around you, but also for you yourself, because it defies everything you have been taught. It goes against the ingrained impulse to immediately react, to compulsively justify yourself, and to incessantly explain your actions. But it is precisely because of this inherent discomfort that it is so incredibly powerful, because it demands self-mastery, and self-mastery is the ultimate source of true power. Now that you have gained a comprehensive understanding of how strategic silence operates within the minds of others, how it effectively activates latent insecurities, systematically breaks down carefully constructed defenses, and mercilessly unmasks concealed postures, it is time to advance to the next level, to transition from being a mere observer to becoming someone who intentionally and strategically wields this formidable power. In the following section, you will discover the precise methods to transform your silence into a conscious and effective weapon, how to effectively win any argument without uttering a single word. When you master this transformative skill, no one will ever be able to exert control over you again. The time has come to cease merely understanding the power of silence and to begin actively wielding it. Knowledge without practical application is merely theoretical. From this moment forward, you will learn to transform your silence into a weapon of surgical precision, no longer merely as a defensive shield, but as a razor-sharp blade, poised to slice through the masks of others at the precise moment they least anticipate it. The first step is deceptively simple, yet brutally effective. Cultivate the discipline to remain deliberately silent when your will screams for an immediate response. This requires immense inner strength, because every fiber of your being will likely yearn to react, to defend yourself, to zealously prove that you are unquestionably right. But that very desire is a form of subtle poison. Every time you succumb to it, you inadvertently reveal that you remain under the control of others, that you are still preoccupied with their opinions, that you are, in effect, still playing their self-serving game. True and unshakable silence is born only when you extinguish that insatiable need, when you truly comprehend that you owe nothing to anyone, and that truth, by its very nature, does not require verbal articulation to exist. The second strategic weapon of silence is meticulous observation. While others around you are engaged in relentless chatter, lost in convoluted explanations, and desperately attempting to fill the void with a torrent of meaningless words, you consciously choose to actively listen. But you do not passively listen as someone merely awaiting their turn to speak. Rather, you listen with the heightened awareness of a seasoned hunter, keenly attuned to the faintest footsteps of prey in the forest. You consciously perceive the underlying fears that are subtly concealed between the lines, the inherent contradictions that are inadvertently revealed, and the profound insecurities that are often masked by a veneer of arrogance. You meticulously store all of this valuable information because when you do choose to speak, your words will possess the precision of a highly skilled surgeon. They will be delivered with the focused accuracy of someone who has thoroughly mastered the emotional landscape of the other person. The third strategic weapon is time. Cultivate the ability to intentionally prolong silence. A deliberately extended pause is an incredibly potent element of tension, and strategic tension is inherently synonymous with power. As the other person continues to speak, anxiously awaiting your immediate reaction, the agonizing silence stretches out, creating a sense of internal collapse. The discomfort intensifies exponentially, and their mind begins to desperately fill the void with a cascade of unfounded assumptions, irrational fears, and escalating paranoia. A single, knowing glance from you, accompanied by unwavering silence, can often have a far greater impact than 10 well-formulated sentences. The fourth strategic weapon is unpredictability. When you master the art of strategic silence, you inherently become unpredictable. And what is unpredictable is always feared and respected, because others have no way of knowing what to expect from you. When they lack the ability to anticipate your actions, they inherently lose their advantage. They become cautious, and they begin to meticulously measure every word they utter. You effectively invert the logic of the interaction. Instead of being merely reactive, you transform yourself into the gravitational center of the entire conversation. At this point, silence is no longer an absence. It is an embodiment of pure dominance. But exercise caution. Do not mistakenly equate silence with passivity. Nietzsche was never an advocate of weakness or resignation. The strategic silence we are discussing here is inherently active, charged with deliberate tension, and brimming with unstated intention. You are not passively withholding. You are strategically preparing, carefully choosing, and precisely positioning yourself with a subtle yet unmistakable form of strength that need not be overtly displayed to be profoundly felt. When the opportune moment finally arrives, the moment when silence has already effectively conveyed everything it needed to, you can choose to utter a single, carefully calibrated sentence, a precise comment that effectively concludes the discussion, not because it was delivered more loudly, but because it resonated with undeniable truth, profound depth, and unwavering conviction. This brings us to an even more delicate and nuanced issue. Up to this point, we have primarily discussed the strategic application of silence to achieve victory, but there are undoubtedly moments when the objective is not merely to win, but to emotionally survive. There are situations where others are not simply engaging in a debate with you. They are actively attempting to exploit you, manipulate you, and systematically drain your energy. You, often without realizing it, are unknowingly relinquishing your power on a daily basis. You're being dominated, often without a single overtly aggressive word needing to be spoken. This is where the darkest aspect of this entire journey comes into play, when silence is no longer a carefully considered strategy, but a muted scream from someone who has effectively lost control of their own life. In the following section, we will expose this uncomfortable truth, revealing the ways in which you may be unwittingly allowing yourself to be exploited. While you may believe you are merely avoiding conflicts, someone else may be quietly building their own empire upon the foundation of your silence. Nietzsche astutely recognized this dynamic long ago. Is there anything more insidiously perverse than being systematically silenced? Perhaps it is being deliberately conditioned to believe that silence is your only viable option, that swallowing your anger, routinely conceding in discussions, and avoiding conflict at all costs are inherently synonymous with maturity, that remaining silent is an undeniable sign of inner peace and emotional balance. But what if I were to reveal that this very belief could be a skillfully designed trap, that this type of silence is not genuine wisdom, but a thinly veiled form of submission? Nietzsche astutely recognized this with brutal clarity. What you often perceive as peace is often nothing more than your own carefully domesticated surrender. Have you ever noticed how certain individuals consistently take advantage of your inherent calmness, your remarkable ability to actively listen, to readily overlook minor transgressions, and to avoid confrontation? They aggressively push their own agendas, ruthlessly impose their wills, and systematically occupy spaces that rightfully belong to you. And yet, you silently allow them to do so. You attempt to convince yourself that it's not worth the effort to fight back, that it is always preferable to maintain superficial harmony, that the underlying issues are not that big of a deal. However, the underlying truth is that you are paying an exorbitant price for this false sense of peace. And perhaps the most insidious aspect of this dynamic is that you are being skillfully exploited by those who have come to understand that you will likely never react. Nietzsche eloquently wrote of the morality of slaves, that deeply ingrained value system constructed by the weak and oppressed as a means of surviving in a world dominated by the strong. It is a morality deeply rooted in resignation, pervasive guilt, and an overwhelming desire to be perceived as nice, an invisible code that subtly teaches you to systematically nullify yourself, to actively diminish your own worth, to passively conform to external pressures, and to paradoxically feel virtuous for doing so. But Nietzsche did not write for those who passively resign themselves to mediocrity. He wrote for those who dare to shatter these self-imposed chains, for those who recognize that they are being manipulated and actively choose to cease participating in their own subjugation. When you willingly accept this type of insidious silence, the kind that slowly consumes you from within, you are effectively surrendering your power without even realizing it. You are allowing yourself to be shaped and molded by the expectations of others. You cease to be your authentic self. Instead, you become merely what others expect you to be. This is the antithesis of what Nietzsche termed the will to power. Because the true will to power is not the urge to shout loudly or to aggressively dominate others. It is, instead, the profound and unwavering commitment to mastering oneself, to reclaiming control of one's own narrative, and to choosing to be silent not out of paralyzing fear, but out of the profound understanding that you owe nothing to anyone. This silence of passive submission must be extinguished, and in its place must be born the vibrant silence of authentic presence, the kind that does not bend to external pressure, that does not humiliate or apologize for existing, the kind that stands tall amidst chaos and, without uttering a single word, alters the course of the entire situation. This is the kind of silence that Nietzsche would deeply respect, the silence of an individual who has truly become the master of himself. But how can you attain this level of self-mastery? How can you transition from being passively manipulated to becoming the unwavering master of your own presence? How can you effectively extinguish the ingrained herd morality within you and be reborn as someone who commands profound authority, even in silence? The answer lies in the most compelling and transformative figure in Nietzsche's entire philosophical framework, the Übermensch. We have previously touched upon this concept. Now it is time to fully understand how to effectively embody the essence of the Übermensch in your own life. In the next and final chapter, you will uncover the essential qualities required to embody this elevated type of human being, because the world does not need more incessant talkers. It needs those who master the profound art of silence and reign with it. We have arrived at the culminating point, and now it is essential that you internalize one fundamental truth with absolute clarity. Silence is not an absence. It is not emptiness. It is not merely a space between sentences. True silence is pure, unadulterated presence. It is the embodiment of self-mastery. It is the definitive sign that you have transcended the need to react to the world around you, and instead are actively shaping it with your mere existence. Nietzsche never wrote for those who are content to merely survive. He wrote for those who relentlessly strive to transcend limitations, for those who are willing to tear off the suffocating masks that society has imposed, even if doing so is undeniably painful. The silence of the Übermensch is neither the silence of the oppressed nor the silence of the coward. It is the tranquil stillness of one who has already achieved victory, even before the battle has commenced. It is the unwavering stillness of one who no longer feels the need to prove anything to anyone, because he possesses an unshakable understanding of who he truly is and, more importantly, what he inherently deserves. Now, critically examine your own life. How many times have you remained silent out of fear, out of guilt, or out of an overwhelming desire to avoid causing any disturbance? How many times have you passively allowed others to make decisions for you, to speak on your behalf, or to trample upon your deeply held truths? Enough is enough. Nietzsche would vehemently argue that living in such a manner is an affront to existence itself, that passively accepting this insidious type of silence is an act of profound self-betrayal. From this day forward, your silence must undergo a radical transformation. It must cease to be an act of escape and instead become an invisible shout of authority, a clearly defined boundary, and an unwavering affirmation of who you authentically are, even if no one else fully understands. It is not essential that others fully comprehend your essence. What is essential is that you live it authentically, and that requires unyielding courage. Do you possess that kind of courage? If so, express your commitment by commenting below. I choose the silence that commands respect, not merely so that I know you have reached the end of this journey, but so that you can publicly affirm this choice, this unwavering commitment to yourself, because words possess power, even when they speak about the transformative power of silence. Do not allow your journey to end here. The next step is essential. It will significantly expand upon what you have learned and propel your understanding even further. Choose to watch it not for my benefit, but because you inherently deserve to transcend limitations and to relentlessly pursue deeper levels of understanding. Always remember, the weak compulsively shout, the strong deliberately remain silent, and the truly wise strategically choose when to speak. So, let's bring it all together. This has been about reclaiming your voice, not necessarily by shouting louder, but by understanding the profound power that lies within silence. It's about recognizing the illusions we're often trapped in and learning how to navigate the world with a newfound sense of self-mastery, drawing inspiration from Nietzsche's insights to cultivate true, unwavering strength. Ultimately, it's about building emotional intelligence and moving towards a more conscious living. A life where your silence isn't a surrender, but a potent force. We've touched on some complex ideas here, delving into areas that can even connect with the AI philosophy of self, prompting us to question what makes us authentically human. I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts. What resonated most with you? Did anything challenge your perspective? Share your experiences, ask your questions, or simply join the conversation in the comments below. Your insights could spark some incredible discussions. And if you found this exploration valuable and you're interested in more neuroscience content that helps bring about cognitive clarity, then please consider subscribing. That way, you'll never miss out on future videos packed with mental health tools, CCs, and ideas to help you cultivate a productivity mindset for genuine, self-optimization. See you in the next one.